Okay, I'm back. Hopefully, I just placed a marker, so I'm very hopeful that I'll figure out a way to go back and edit that out. I have no idea what happened. The internet died. It was a whole thing. Okay, so we were. The state was trying to refresh his recollection on what he said about the value of her bike. Anyway, what it comes down to is he eventually says that he told detectives it would be difficult for the general public to know the value of the bike because it was just like nondescript. Uh, and then the next question is, what did you say when you learned about KA's vehicle being at the apartment where Mo was? He said he didn't remember. He had to be refreshed. Beck, sorry. Oh my gosh. Okay. So they say, what did you say when you found out that KA's vehicle was seen at the scene, or about it being when you learned about it being at the apartment where Mo was? He says, I don't remember. He got refreshed. It says, do you recall? Oh, and then he says, I think I said, and then he read it. I don't know how to respond to that, and this is intense information. Do you recall discussing with detectives when you actually entered Mo's name in your phone as Christine? Um, and then he said, I wanted to be able to connect with Moriah and not trigger old wounds that that the defendant was carrying. And then he says he gets Colin to clarify and state that it had been evident that she had gone through my phone in the past. Do you remember do you remember giving them an exact date when she went through your phone? Can't remember. It's been a long, and then he agrees with the prosecutor that it's been a long, drawn out, traumatic experience, which is true. And then he looks at the document and says, I indicated that October 25th, she went through my phone. So that's when she went through his phone. Which is weird because they were broken up. They were broken up. And he was dating Mo at that point, right? That's weird. And then they said, did you travel to the shooting range to go shooting with the defendant in January of 2022? He says he did not. Did you prepare the guns for D to take to the range? No. Did you load them? No. Did you take the cable locks out before D went to the range to practice? No. Did you replace cable locks after she came home? No. Did you return them to the box in your closet after she came home? No. Then we go back into recross, and there's just questions about whether or not he had manipulated the handguns, like how mechanical he was. He says he doesn't really understand guns. He says that he doesn't know if the defendant knew how to clean guns. He doesn't know if she cleaned the gun after she went to the range. He doesn't know if she's ever cleaned the gun. They didn't have a gun cleaning kit. He doesn't know if she took any training or if she just went to shoot. He doesn't know if she learned to put it back together or to take it apart. He doesn't recall sharing. And then gets Colin to admit that he shared with detectives something about Kaitlin being very female, very girly, like she really likes pink. She's like not into guns. She doesn't know about that kind of stuff. She's just very girly. She wasn't a gun aficionado. And then she got the defense got him to say that previously he had said she was mechanically inept when it came to her bike. And he said, I don't know why I said that. No, she was very capable when it came to her own bike. But apparently I told Detective Spittler that she was mechanically inept. Yes. Then the state gets redirect again. Did you give defendant Mo's number? No. And then there was an objection because it exceeded the scope of recross. It was overruled. He got to answer. Did you discuss with detectives Kaitlin's behavior towards other women? Question. Did she do this with all the girls in your phone? Response. Most of them. And then they say, did you kill Moriah Wilson? He says, no. Pass the witness. And then the witness steps down. The defense would not release Colin from the rule, so he is still subject to recall and under the rule, meaning he can't watch any of the trial. He can't discuss any of the trial with any other witnesses or anybody in the case or anyone really. He can't discuss the case with anybody involved, and he is subject to recall during the defense's case in chief. And so I think that might have been like one of the. I know he was angry. He was already wound up when he got there because there was an issue with the cameraman when he was arriving, but then also when he was leaving. And I think I'm not sure he expected to be. I think he kind of expected to be released. But yeah, he had a lot of anger and sadness and trauma. So after he left, he ended up getting into another little squabble with a cameraman. And so then the next witness was Alan Burrows. His name's actually Kenneth Alan Burrows. He just came on. He's a friend of Colin. He knew Kaitlin. He knew them because he bought a bike from Colin at the end of 2020. He's a casual racer. He says he hung out a few times with Kaitlin, mostly friends with Colin. He had contact with Colin on 5/11/22. They were discussing bike parts. He was going to lend me for a race around 9. Oh, yes. Okay, so this is actually the person he was on the phone call that he had a phone call with after he got home from dropping off Mo. Remember, he sent Kaitlin text messages, and then he said he remembered having a phone call with somebody about bike parts, and then he sent another message, and then she came home. So at about 9 o'clock in the evening, this guy, Alan Burrows, was on his way back from Houston, and he was almost to the 71 turnoff in Columbia, and he called Colin to ask him about some parts that he was going to borrow. And they talked for about 8 minutes. I think it was 7 or 8 minutes. It was 8 minutes. And the phone call was actually at 9:07 a.m. And when you turn off on 71 in Columbus, the reception gets really bad and your phone calls drop. It happens to me like every time on my way back from Houston. And so that's the reason that the phone call ended, is because he turned off onto 71. But they discussed him stopping by Colin's house and picking up the parts that he was going to borrow. And he said when he was on the phone with Colin that Colin was at his residence, and he knows this because we'll get there, I guess. Okay, so then he went by Colin's residence after the call. He pulled up, and as he got into Austin, and when he got to Colin's, his garage was open, and through the garage door in the kitchen, he said he could see Colin and Kaitlin talking. He grabbed the parts and left and had no interaction with them, and that was around 10 o'clock p.m. He said they just looked tired at the end of a long day. So I'm pretty sure the state, well, I know why the state brought this guy on as a witness, to show that, as his alibi for he was really at home at 9:07 p.m. because he talked to Alan. The state then gets him on cross, and the prosecutor was Jeremy, and he ask him what he does for a living. Turns out the guy is a lobbyist. He has no mechanical training, but he did work in a bike shop in college, I think he said. He's very casual racer. He would go to Colin for tips and stuff. And he said mostly Colin was busy with professional racing at the time. He said he was a newer friend. He was busy training and traveling. He wasn't in his inner circle of friends. They would hang out and it would be social, but they were never in each other's inner circles. He would go by his house for help and they would hang out. He thinks he met Kaitlin in the summer of 2020. He remembers one time when they all went out to a property on Onion Creek that Colin was interested in renting out, and they all went swimming in the creek. Did you know about their relationship? They were dating. I didn't think that he was that into her. You did learn that they lived together eventually? Yes. What did she do for a living? She was a realtor. And then he says, I ran into her they asked like if he knew that she was into yoga and stuff, and he said, yeah, because I'd run into her at Meteor Cafe down south. It's like a cycling cafe that's down south in South Austin off Congress. I've never been there. Now I'm definitely going to have to go, but apparently everybody in the cycling community goes. So he had run into her at Meteor a few times, and I guess that's how he knew that she was into yoga and she was athletic or something. And then they asked, were you connected to Bluetooth in your car? And he says he thinks so. And they said, well, were you able to hear what was happening in the background on Colin's side? And he said, in the background, yeah, there was nothing happening in the background. And then Jeremy says, so there wasn't anything going on in the background? He says, no. And Jeremy says, so you said he was at home based on what he told you, but not because you heard it. And he's like, what do you mean I heard it? And he's like, well, you said he was looking for the part. So did you hear him like rummaging for this part? And he's like, well, I don't know. I know that he told me he would look for it, and then he said he found it, and then he said he would put it on the porch, and then it was on the porch. And then there's a screenshot of so they have a screenshot of the call log on the screen while he's testifying, and Jeremy says, where does this screenshot tell you Colin Strickland's location? And he says, it does not. And then Jeremy says, okay, so then your statement that he was at home is based on what Colin told you, correct? And I think eventually he says, like, yeah. And then on redirect, they say, based on your familiarity with Colin Strickland, did anything lead you to believe that he was being dishonest? Answer, absolutely not. And was the part you discussed the one you ended up picking up later? Yes. The next witness was Lance Tyndall, another friend from the cycling community, just like a casual friend. But this guy's also a realtor. He's been here since 2008, but he also went to school here from 96 to 2000. He's been friends with Colin for more than 3 years. Friends through they had a mutual friend named Kyle. He also just casually cycles. He would go to races. He had gone to races that Colin has participated in, and there was also a person there named Kaitlin, yes, his girlfriend. On 5/12/22, why did you go to Colin's house that day? Oh, it was to buy wheels. So this is the guy that pulled up to buy the wheels as Colin was leaving to go with detectives. When you arrived, what did you see? He saw a police car. He saw Colin was leaving out of the driveway, and he said he had to go because a friend had died the night before, and he had to go answer questions. Tyndall says, died like homicide? And he said, yes. They think she was murdered last night. I have to go. So he said that was shocking. And then he went up to the door, and Kaitlin was there. And there was also a handyman, which this is the only person I've ever heard mention that. He said there was also a handyman there, but he didn't have any interaction with the handyman. I'm wondering if this was this David guy. Kaitlin answered the door and asked if Lance had heard what had happened, and he said yes. And then she asked if I knew who it was, and told me it was Mo Wilson, and who she was, and why she was in Austin, and about all her accomplishments. And like, she told her that she was traveling through Austin, or that she was here for the race. They discussed whether Austin was getting more dangerous. I said I wouldn't have expected Mo to get murdered just passing through. She just Kaitlin was just telling me the facts as she knew them. She asked if I knew where Cherrywood was, and did I think it was a dangerous place. She brought up Cherrywood. I was surprised that she brought it up because she is a realtor in Austin, and Cherrywood is a known place that's seen a lot of development. So I thought it was weird that she wouldn't have an opinion of the neighborhood herself. She asked if she could go to the bathroom before she finished the last wheel, and I just needed a tire lever. She was gone for like 10 minutes, and finally, when she came back, I asked for a tire lever and popped it off and got out of there. He says he has no idea where she went. She was like the one that was doing all the work and taking the tires off, and then she said she had to go to the bathroom before she finished the last one. And he was like looking all over for a tire lever. He couldn't find one. And then finally he was like, hey, I'm happy to get out of here if you can just give me a tire lever. She ended up having to go to her bag, get it, gave it to him. He popped it off and he left. No idea what she was doing. Did you have an exchange with Colin Strickland that day? Yes. At 8:02 a.m. Are you free to come by? Yeah, I will stop by after I drop off. Okay, so at 8:02 a.m., Colin texted him and said, "Are you free to come by?" And he said, "Yeah, I'll stop by after I drop my daughter at school." And then at 10:40, Lance sent Colin a message that said, "Sorry, your day started with such awful news. Send me your Venmo. Do you have any rotors or cassettes you would want to sell me as well?" He says APD called him about his relationship with Kaitlin Armstrong and Colin Strickland, and he discussed his personal knowledge with detectives. He went to events. He went to a handful of events with Colin with his sponsors, and he was doing things, and the rest of them were just kind of hanging around in the background. And he says the rest of them meant he and Kaitlin and whoever else of their friends were there. He said it was clear that she wanted to be seen as Colin's girlfriend at those events, but it wasn't always reciprocated. So we're hearing this again. He gives an example of when she wore a kit identical to Colin's and at an event, and Lance says that he asked him about it, and he said it was clear that it could have only come from him, and it was clear he would have preferred she not wear that to his event. He wanted her to change out the outfit into something that wasn't exactly like his. And then they say, Austin has seen a lot of change since 2008. Are you familiar with neighborhoods as a realtor in Austin? Oh, this has to be crossed, right? This is crossed. And this is Joffrey Purrier. But I forgot to note that. Oh, it's crazy. Okay. So they're really going to dig into this Cherrywood thing. Okay, so would you be familiar with neighborhoods as a realtor in Austin? Yes. So if I say define Cherrywood, what would you say? He said, I'd say it was south of airport, east of 35, goes on. And then he says, and the Chestnut neighborhood, south of that, a lot of times, he's actually, Lance says the Chestnut neighborhood is south of that. And a lot of times, the two neighborhoods end up being combined. And then, Joffrey gets up and shows him a map that reflects Chestnut, Maple, and the other streets. And he says, would you say that that's in the Chestnut neighborhood or the Cherrywood neighborhood? And he says, Chestnut. And then he says, do you think that it is reasonable that Colin Strickland relayed the info about it being Cherrywood to Kaitlin? I mean, that was the craziest thing to ask him. Obviously, that's going to get objected to. I mean, extreme speculation. And yeah, so that's exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to show that, and it was a good point, but I think the jury got it without him having to ask that last question, right? They're showing that this info was told to her by Colin, because Colin's the one that called this neighborhood Cherrywood. And it's not Cherrywood. There's no reason that it should ever be called Cherrywood. Like, no map is going to call it Cherrywood. So that's just like Colin's belief in his own head, not really something that anybody's told him, or there was no evidence that they commonly referred to this area as Cherrywood. So the defense is like trying to point out that clearly that information about the neighborhood came from Colin. Okay, yeah, so that was sustained. And then Joffrey says, okay, let's ask this. Was Colin on the property when you first got there? And he says, yes. And then Joffrey says, okay, and you were talking to Kaitlin about Austin becoming more violent, and you ask if you think Cherrywood is a safe neighborhood. He said, actually, she asked me. And you found her to be shocked at the news as someone that was just finding out about the news. Like you found her to be just as shocked as you were, right? He said, yes, like I felt like we were acting the same about this news. When I saw him and I saw her, it was shocking. Not what I expected when I decided to go to Colin Strickland's that morning. Seemed like we would all be shocked in that moment. He's friends with Colin from going on social rides with Colin, and friends with his friends, and that's how they became friends. He had been to his house prior to that, and he probably knew where to go. He probably didn't have to ask for directions. And then he says, have you been there many occasions or a few occasions? And he says many. And then he says, have there been many people there? And he says, yes. And he clarifies, really, it's just been Colin and other cyclists. He doesn't know that he had ever even seen Kaitlin Armstrong at the property prior to that day. He went there a handful of times, mainly with his friend Kyle. And so he clarifies and said, I guess I should have said a few times, not many times. Do you know how long Kaitlin worked as a real estate agent? No. Oh, so this is recross. I don't know why I don't have this either. So then not recross, redirect. So the state gets him back and asks, do you know how long Kaitlin worked as a real estate agent? No. Do you know if she had any listings in Austin? Oh, yeah, because that's the other thing. So the state was trying to say, like, this information came from Colin, because obviously if she knew where, if it had been her that had done this, she knows where Mo was staying, right? If she knew where the house was because she had been there, because she's the one that did it, then she would, so she'd know where it was. And since she's a realtor, she would know that that's not Cherrywood. So she wouldn't have asked you if you thought it was weird or if you thought Cherrywood was dangerous, implying that it happened in Cherrywood, because she would know that this is chestnut, whatever it's called. But the state comes back and says, not so fast. Do you know how long Kaitlin worked as a real estate agent? And I think it was like no time at all, like months, maybe. Do you know if she had any listings in Austin? No. Do you know if she made any sales as an agent? And he says, well, I mean, I know she bought property. And the state's like, right. But as far as like listing as the agent, do you know that? And he says, no. No, I don't know. Did Colin Strickland tell you he was a person of interest? He says no. And then it gets objected to as hearsay and it was sustained. To your knowledge, was Colin Strickland a person of interest when he went to talk to them? And he says no. And the reason that the state brought this up is because Joffrey on Cross kept discussing how this situation was like such an awkward situation because his friend had just had to go off with police to answer questions as the person of interest in the murder of somebody in their community, like in the larger cycling community that they all knew of, and like how awkward that must be. And the state's like, actually, the state said he was a person of interest, but did you ever think he was a person of interest? And he's like, no. Okay. Then finally, the last the last witness of the day was Detective Spittler, and my silly little laptop died. Shocking. And so I had to take some of it in my notebook here. Okay. So he had been with APD for 8 years. He has been in homicide for 1.5 years. He was the lead detective on the case. He transferred from the aggravated assault unit to homicide, and he had handled about 125 active aggravated assault cases in approximately a year that he was on the ag assault unit. To get to be classified as aggravated assault, he said that it has to have a weapon or serious bodily injury. He gave examples of firearms, knives, bats. He said the biggest difference between being a detective or working in the aggravated assault unit and working in the homicide unit is that when he was on the aggravated assault cases, most of the time he could speak to the victim, whereas on the homicide unit he can never speak to the victim because it's homicide and they are deceased. And they ask if you've ever had a complaining witness. They said victim injured so badly that they stayed in the hospital and couldn't interview for a while. He says yes. There were some that he could never interview. And then he said that the way that the homicide unit works is they work as a team, and they have like Tuesday team meetings where they all sit around the conference table and discuss their cases together and get ideas on ways to approach, and they all discuss it. And they do not document in their offense reports every every exchange of ideas that they have, like all of these meetings, all the times that they talk to other colleagues in the hallway, because it would take way too long, and it's too many ideas and convos to document without any of it being recorded. He said this was his first homicide assignment, this case. And Timothy Price was the second detective on the case. So he was a secondary detective responsible for the scene, evidence collection, and assisting the primary lead. He can also step in for the primary where needed. Second detective's main responsibility is is documenting the crime scene and collecting evidence. Primary will respond to headquarters to do interviews and work leads, because they need to have the interviews with those witnesses as soon as they're available, right away. You don't want to let any time pass. He says he was on call when he was notified about the case. He received a phone call from the sergeant, And he reported to headquarters where he was told that a witness, Kaitlin Cash, was going to be there to be interviewed. He wanted to get her whereabouts, if she owned guns, her demeanor. He says after he interviewed Cash and she was released, he left headquarters and responded to the crime scene. He left headquarters around 3:50 or 4 a.m., and he headed to the scene. Detectives Price and Ramirez were already there at the scene. Ramirez was doing video canvassing, tracking down videos. Price had been on scene while Spittler was doing the interviews at headquarters. Price updated him and did a walkthrough of the scene. He talks about that paint stain. I'm not even going to go over that. That's silly. He says all the things the other people have said about the way that it looked on the inside and the things he saw, all of that. He says he did not assist in canvassing for video that night. However, he saw a video from a Ring camera from Detective Ramirez and saw the black SUV on that video. He also spoke with somebody named Zachary, who was like wanting to leave and needed to like have some vehicles moved. And so he said, before we let him out, let's talk to him. I guess he was a neighbor or in the area. And he said that guy didn't have anything. He didn't see anything, didn't hear anything, didn't know what was going on. So he wasn't helpful. He said Price showed him where the bike had been and that he discovered more evidence. And I didn't hear what kind of evidence it was, but more evidence in that grassy section of the bamboo. After the sun started to come up and, the crime scene was illuminated more, he found another piece of evidence over there. And then they talk about, I think they call it the tack and tell unit. And he had communication with them, and they he said, wait, what? Tack and Tell unit had communication with Tack and Tell. He had already spoken to Cash at this point. He had walked the scene. He had observed and discussed with the other two detectives, and he had seen that video. And he says that Cash, when he interviewed her, had showed him that at 8:36, her app said the door unlocked. And then on this Ring video camera footage that he sees, it says at 8:37, there is a black SUV slowly driving in the alleyway. He knew about Colin Strickland being the last person to see her alive, and he could be a person of interest or a very valuable witness. So this was relayed to Tack and Tell, and they returned info that a black SUV was indeed seen parked in Colin Strickland's driveway. Tack and Tell was in the vicinity, so they were doing surveillance. They were in the vicinity of Colin Strickland's residence, surveilling it before he got there. So before he got there that morning to talk to Colin. He says he attempted to call Colin early in the morning, but he didn't answer, and he decided not to leave that kind of information on a voicemail. He went by the house and saw people moving around the house, and he wanted to speak with them because he wasn't sure if they were planning on leaving and getting out of there, and he wanted to make it more of a death notification type situation. And then the defense said, "Judge, can we approach?" And then there was a break. And so then we just continue when we come back. He says, early in the morning, around 8 o'clock in the morning or so, the decision was made to go to Colin's house at 8:52 a.m. with Detective Ayers. They drove there. They saw a Mercedes, the BMW motorcycle, and the black Jeep parked in the driveway. They noticed he noticed, but the lead detective noticed the chrome around the windows and the bike rack on the trailer hitch, the luggage rack, and the wheels all matched the description from that video. And he wanted to talk to that driver, but he did not know who the driver was at that time. He saw Colin in the garage and he walked towards him. he said who he was, and he confirmed that that was Colin. And then he asked him if he knew Anna, and he said, like, do you know Anna Wilson? He actually said, do you know Anna Mo Wilson? And Colin was confused. Once he explained that it was Mo Wilson, then Colin said he knew him. And the detective said she passed away. He was very surprised. They talked about what he did the night before. At some point, he asked him to meet him at Homicide to do an interview, and Colin agreed. And then the detective says that he told everyone back at Homicide that the plan, when he decided to go out there, his plan had been that he was just going to interview Colin at Colin's place, where he finds him. And if anything seemed suspicious, then he would bring him down to the station. So I guess he's saying it seemed suspicious. He agrees to go to the station. He drove his Mercedes. He was cooperative. When they get down to the station, it's a very long video. It's about 6.5 hour long video. So very long interrogation. During the course of the interview, Colin was a person of interest. Like when the interview started off, his role is as a person of interest. And then they say, did you, through the course of that interview, find out info you were unaware of when he entered the interview? And he says yes. His impression of Colin regarding how cooperative and the communication, like with questions and answers and back and forth, he was good about answering and being very cooperative and answering as much as he possibly could. Everything that we asked him, he didn't seem like he was trying to hold anything back. We asked who was driving the Jeep, and were you able to find that out? There was an objection for hearsay. It was overruled. He says, no, he wasn't able to find it out. Were you able to find out who the owner was? Yes. Did you find out info about Colin's relationship with Mo? Yes. Info regarding other people's relationships with Colin? Yes. Like, in other words, Kaitlin. During the course of your interview, you determined you needed to talk to Kaitlin Armstrong. Did you convey that info? He says yes. He conveyed the info to the tactical team and others in the office. And he conveyed that by calling a break and physically walking out of the interview room and going and relaying that information to the other people in the office. It became a pretty high priority to speak with Kaitlin based on the info learned from Colin. The decision was made to get a search warrant for the residence. And this was based on Colin being the last person to see her alive, the black SUV matching the one on the scene, the 2 handguns that they knew about at this point, the relationship between the defendant and Mo provided to them by Colin Strickland. And the detective said that this really kind of brought a motive into play at that point. They know that there's someone that is close to Mo that last saw her alive, and they know that there is someone close to that person. And jealousy and their mentioning of Kaitlin Armstrong reaching out to Mo in the past, all of it. Jealousy, why are you using that phrase? We used that phrase in the interview with Colin, and Colin used that phrase. I asked if she was jealous towards females in general or just towards Mo. The word really came up once I discovered that Colin had changed the name of Mo in his phone so he could conceal the fact that they were talking to each other. He was also deleting messages from Mo to conceal that they were communicating. While the interview was going on, another detective was getting the search warrant. So he wasn't preparing the search warrant. Another detective was preparing the search warrant because he needed to continue getting information from Colin, but they thought it was extremely important to get a search warrant for that house. It was very urgent. Was there a discussion regarding what could be done to get out, to reach out to the defendant on this case? Kofor asks to approach. And then they start talking about these giant stickers that they put on dry erase boards all over the office. And they all contribute details to these stickies on the dry erase board. So they, for each case, they'll grab a dry erase board, they attach one of these stickies to it, and then they just like start putting all the relevant information so that it's there for everybody in the office to see in case they get a tip that comes in. And since they work as a team, sometimes people add to that board and they don't even know where the information came from. So they basically, all of this leads to, at some point, when Kaitlin Armstrong's name came into the mix, that was added to the board. So this had to have been while the interview with Colin was still going on, or very shortly thereafter. So her name's added to the board, and her date of birth. And then somebody else, he doesn't know who, ran her info in the system and found out that she had a Class B misdemeanor warrant for theft of service from 2018, I think. And so the decision was made to pick her up on that warrant. And they say, did anyone discuss going and asking her to come talk? And he says, no, the plan was to arrest her and get her to talk. Based on the info on the board and the date of birth, they ran the check for the warrant, found she had an active warrant, and boom. So the decision was made to serve the warrant on Kaitlin Armstrong at her house. Did you go serve it on her? No. I was still in the interview with Colin. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, this was happening while he's in the interview. So they did this quickly. So they were there at the same time. Was she arrested and actually brought to headquarters? Yes. But you didn't see her? No. Did someone else speak to her that day? Yes. Who? Katie Connor, another detective. So this is who we should direct these questions to? Yes. Was she released? Yes. I was told their objection, hearsay sustained. She was allowed to go home, and how? We drove her back. Were you there when she was dropped off? Do you know when she got there? If any type of police investigation had taken place? I do not know if we had served the search warrant already, but it was this same day. And during the search warrant, were you there? No. During the search, I was finished with my interview with Colin and went home to get some rest. His next day on work was 5/13. He kept working on the case. He was updated on everything that had taken place. The important things that he found out about the search were that they got 2 firearms, and those, he said, they were important because they could potentially be the murder weapon, or one of them could be, or both of them could be if there were 2 shooters. So the firearms needed to be inspected immediately. He submitted e-traces that day to find out who purchased the firearms. He reached out and spoke to most families. So this is on 5/13. She died on the 11th. Most family was not notified of her death until the 13th. That just made me so sad, sitting in the courtroom and realizing that, like, as a mother, to not have any idea that your daughter is dead for 2 days or a day and a half or however long it was, to just have that info, that's just so sad. So sad to me. They asked if there was anyone who would want to hurt Mo, asked about passcodes for her phone. They didn't have them, but they directed them to somebody who could help, and that person did help. They discussed video footage from surveillance around the scene. Oh, wait. No, he didn't discuss that with their family. He's saying that he looked into the video footage from surveillance around the scene and submitted a search warrant for Colin Strickland's phone. So you already had the information regarding Kaitlin Armstrong, and you are still asking her family if they know who could have done this. They give you some info, which leads you to talk to several other family members. Yes. Were efforts made to get into her phone and computer that day? Yes. Why was that important? Because it has a wealth of information like text, shopping plans, phone calls, GPS location data. Were you able by the end of the day to secure info that would allow someone to access her phone? Yes. You received additional video footage from 2213 East 18th Street. Yeah, I read a supplemental from another officer who had observed these cameras and the footage and identified the owner, and so I contacted the owner. And they were cooperative. On the 14th, he was made aware that there was going to be a press release and that it was going to become public knowledge. So he wanted to first inform the family so that they would know that this was going public. Around this time, he went back to the neighborhood where this had all happened. On 5/15, he went back to the neighborhood. He met a couple walking their dog, and he asked them to take a photo of his business card and post it on social media and ask all the people in the area to contact him if they had any additional info, and especially if they had video footage. While he was in the neighborhood, he had a conversation with David Harris by the stairs of Cash's Place. He observed 8 different residences that potentially had cameras. Did you follow up with them? Yes. Some provided you video and some did not. Yes, the ones that didn't, their cameras didn't pick anything up or the cameras weren't working. He received info from anonymous callers. By this date, he had at least some initial info secured from Mo's phone. Did it provide helpful information? He discovered that Mo had last text with someone at 9:13 p.m. and they identified the person as Christopher Strickland. It was a podcaster on the East Coast that does some kind of cycling podcast. It was not someone related to Colin. And that was at 9:13 p.m. was her last text. So she was still alive at 9:13. And that makes sense because wasn't it like 9:15 or 9:17 that you hear the screams and the gunshots? Did you find text between Colin Strickland and Mo? Yes. Were those helpful? Yes. Any evidence that helped you confirm the motorcycle info on Colin Strickland? Yes, we got a video from 1802 Maple Avenue, which showed the alleyway that leads to her door, but it's just north of 17th Street. And on that video that I secured, I was able to see the motorcycle. On the 16th, continuous running video doorbell camera recording was provided by neighbor of Cash, and that's the one that has the screams and the gunshot. He was able to review the videos, screams and gunshot, depicted more video of this black Jeep cruising around the neighborhood. On the 17th, he did this second interview with Colin Strickland and his attorney. And after the conclusion of that interview, he received some significant information. He received ballistics info regarding the firearms from the search of Colin Strickland's home, and it matched the cartridges found on the scene. Video evidence as far as relative location, the one that shows a motorcycle through the alleyway. Wait, what? Oh, these are all the things. Another video that he ended up observing at 8:43, a motorcycle seen driving on a frontage road close to Colin Strickland's home. So that shows that by 8:43, he was already like on his way home. And when he received the ballistics report, he believed that there was now probable cause to issue a warrant for Kaitlin's arrest. Was that the end of your investigation? No, I kept working. Did you continue trying to acquire electronic data from phone and laptop? Yes. high level of success with Miss Wilson's phone as well as Colin Strickland's laptop. Other civilians came forward with additional info that was probative to the case. Among other items that he was able to secure in the next 10 days or so were returns on the Strava app. He said it's an app that records location and time it took you to do a race. It saves segments on the trail. It shows your location from like where you started and where you ended. It also stores information about whose profile you looked at and whether or not you clicked on any specific tabs within that profile, like any specific races. He said it's like if you went to Facebook and clicked on a profile, it would show you looked at a profile. But if you then click on a post from that person's profile, it would show that you are now looking at a post, not just the profile. So Strava does the same thing. Her ride from 511 on Strava puts her within a block or so of the start of her route, right? And he says, yes, actually, it shows where she started at the bottom of the stairs. Was Kaitlin looking at Mo's Strava profile? He says, yes, on 5/9, she looked at it. On 5/10, she looked at it 3 times. And on 5/11, she looked at it once. Do you know where Kaitlin was at this time? No. Was a warrant out for her arrest? Yes. Was it well known that a warrant was out? Yes. Was it well known throughout the U.S.? Yes. Did you receive calls from national media? Yes. On June 2nd, they learned that her vehicle was located at Carmack in North Austin. He ended up doing another search warrant for the Jeep itself and getting the infotainment system, having it removed and sent to be forensically examined because it's like a big GPS. He submitted it to evidence. On 6/30/22, he received notice from Lone Star Fugitive Task Force that they had located her. And did they tell you where she had been located? Yes. Did you have occasion to meet with reps from U.S. Marshals Service within a week or so of talking to Lone Star Fugitive Task Force? Yes. Did they provide you with any evidence? Yes. A bag of Kaitlin's from Costa Rica. When you say bag, what are you talking about? Cofer, may we approach? And then the jury is released. And no, we don't have court tomorrow. We will start on Wednesday. Okay, so that was the day. Super long. Sorry about that. Like, subscribe, and share. I'll be back with more updates. Tomorrow, court resumes. Bye.